In 1948, the State of Israel was established, beginning an era marked by controversy, border disputes, and war. But something that is often overlooked is an incredible story of a brand new nation developing economically, through extreme highs and lows to come out as one of the richest in the world. Israel has created a benchmark on how to set up a nation from scratch, implement innovative policies, and emerge thriving despite constant turbulence. So how exactly did Israel achieve this feat? Well, to understand the economic foundations of modern-day Israel, we have to go way back to its origins, which trace back to the 1880s, when the first wave of Zionist immigrants landed on the shores of Palestine, which was under Ottoman rule at the time. They joined a small, existing Jewish community, establishing agricultural settlements, dabbling in industry, reviving Hebrew as the spoken language, and laying down new economic and social institutions. The region was not untouched by the ravages of World War I, which saw the Jewish population shrink by a third. However, post-war the geopolitical tides shifted, bringing Palestine under British control, following the Balfour Declaration's vision of a Jewish national home in Palestine. This British mandate, formalised in 1920 by the League of Nations, stretched until May 1948, providing a scaffold for Israel's social, political, and economic structure. During the mandatory period, though under a unified economic policy, the Jewish and Arab economies burgeoned separately, with minimal intertwining. The Jewish economic sector, however, witnessed a significant propulsion from two key catalysts: immigration and capital inflows. Waves of immigrants, peaking notably in the mid-1920s and mid-1930s, poured into the region. They were a mix of ideological Zionists and refugees fleeing economic and political hardships from Central and Eastern Europe. Their arrival was more than a population bump. It was an infusion of human capital that played a crucial role in economic growth. Alongside this, capital, both public and private, flowed into the Jewish sector, fueling a rapid growth in the national product. Between 1922 to 1947, the Jewish sector's real net domestic product soared, averaging a growth rate of 13.2%. Manufacturing and textiles, though slow initially, skyrocketed during World War II as Palestine became a significant supplier to the British forces in the Middle East. Meanwhile, agriculture, an ideological pillar, made substantial strides, while immigration facilitated a housing construction boom. A standout feature was the burgeoning services sector, encapsulating education, health, finance, and business sectors, accounting for more than half of the total NDP. These were just a glimpse of the Jewish governmental institutions that would soon increase substantially following independence from British rule. The end of the British mandate for Palestine came in May 1948, resulting in the Israeli Declaration of Independence and the First Arab-Israeli War. The resulting economic hurdles were nothing short of monumental. Israel had to finance and navigate through war with its neighbours, welcome an influx of immigrants, initially those stranded in camps across Europe and Cyprus, ensure the supply of basic necessities to both the long-standing and newly arrived population, and erect a government machinery capable of tackling these enormous challenges. They also inhabited a landscape that was as challenging as the political climate. A land with sparse water, limited arable soil, and a scarcity of minerals provided limited internal options. The government had a huge task ahead. Thankfully, the transition to a formal government structure was relatively seamless, thanks to the semi-governmental Jewish institutions that had already blossomed during the British Mandate period. However, the other challenges were mounting and not letting up. As the dust of war began to settle with ceasefire agreements inked in 1949, Israel found itself welcoming 340,000 immigrants. This continued, so by the end of 1951, the Jewish population had doubled. In the face of soaring demand and limited resources, Israel adopted a stringent austerity program, which lasted from 1949 to 59. Price controls and rationing became the order of the day to rein in inflationary government finance and ensure a supply of basic commodities. Yet the formidable tasks of providing housing and employment for millions of new inhabitants were only resolved through decades of pain. Israel was financially overwhelmed and faced a deep economic crisis. Unemployment was high and foreign currency reserves were scarce. New policies and most importantly, funds, were desperately needed for Israel to transition into a growing nation. A pivotal shift came with the introduction of the new economic policy in early 1952. This policy adjusted the value of Israel's currency to better align with global trade. It also gradually eased off some strict controls on prices and the rationing of essential items, allowing more flexibility in the market. During this time, the active encouragement for more people to migrate to Israel was toned down, allowing the country to focus focus on settling the newcomers already there. The government began taking the reins of the economy firmly, driven both by the pressing needs and the socialist ethos of the primary political party in the ruling coalitions. Government budgets and protectionist policies blossomed. Subsidies were also doled out to bolster exports beyond the traditional realms of citrus products and cut diamonds. In the span from 1950 to 1965, Israel enjoyed consistent economic growth. The nation's GNP, a measure of its economic output, soared at an annual average rate of over 11%, while the per capita GNP grew by more than 6%. But what fueled this economic upswing other than new policy? A significant driver was the large influx of capital from various sources, including US aid and the sales of State of Israel bonds abroad. Another major beneficiary to this success arrived in 1952, when Israel and West Germany inked an agreement for reparations to compensate for the Holocaust atrocities and the assimilation of refugees. Over the next 14 years, West Germany transferred 3 billion marks to Israel, which at the peak in 1956 constituted a staggering 87.5% of Israel's income. Israel now had significant resources to pour into their economy. The windfall from these sources was invested and channeled into pivotal industrial and agricultural ventures, propelling Israel towards economic self-sufficiency. Noteworthy projects like the Hadera power plant, the Dead Sea Works, the National Water Carrier, and port expansions in Haifa, Ashdod, and Eilat were realized. Textiles emerged as a powerhouse, constituting about 12% of industrial exports, trailing only behind polished diamonds. These new industries led the way for massive improvements in quality of life and income. Between 1950 and 63, the real-term expenditure among wage-earner families skyrocketed by 97%, and from 1955 to 1966, per capita consumption soared by a whopping 220%. During the 1960s, the way the government operated the economy changed significantly. Previously large government, Israel transitioned into freer markets and reduced state intervention, ending up as a mixed economy. This allowed for some central control while also embracing the dynamism and creativity inherent in private enterprise, a perfect environment for technological innovation and expansion. So we've explained how increased funding and new economic policies brought initial prosperity to Israel, but the late 60s saw turbulence that would impact Israel and the entire region forever. The Six-Day War of 1967 pitted Israel against Egypt, Syria, and Jordan. Israel emerged victorious, now controlling the Palestinian territories of the West Bank and Gaza Strip. They were now responsible for the economic well-being of these areas, establishing Jewish settlements. However, while extra land may seem like an instant economic boost, it came at the cost of increased hostilities. Special investments in infrastructure were made to protect Jewish settlers, and now a larger portion of government spending were concentrated on defense and military spending. Post-war, the economies of Israel and the occupied territories began to intertwine to some extent. Trade in goods and services burgeoned, albeit with some restrictions, particularly on exports to Israel, of products seen as too competitive. The integration saw a significant number of Palestinian workers finding employment in Israel, especially in the realms of construction and agriculture. The Palestinian economy embarked on a trajectory of rapid development. The period between 1969 and 1972 saw an impressive near 20% annual growth, which tapered to 5% from 1973 to 1980. This loss of growth was perhaps explained by the next major war, the Yom Kippur War of 1973. The war resulted in a significant loss of life and a massive economic burden. The costs of the war, along with global economic turbulence, initiated a period of stagflation, a situation where the economy experienced stagnant growth alongside high inflation. As a result, growth slowed and government expenditures rose. The defense budget rose to its highest at 30% of GNP between 1974-78, just illustrating how much of a strain regional tensions were on their economy. Israel was lucky enough to receive consistent US funding throughout this period. Following the war, the US directly contributed to defense spending. Between 1973 and 1982, annual loans and grants averaged $1.9 billion, covering 60% of total defense imports. European partnership was also established. In 1975, a free trade area agreement was met with the European Economic Community for Industrial Goods. This foreign intervention helped Israel get through these tough periods, with the only consequences really being lower growth rates than usual. It is clear, though, that by the late 70s, the Israeli economic miracle was well and truly over. What followed in the 80s was near catastrophic. The hyperinflation crisis of the 1980s was a tumultuous chapter in Israel's economic history. As the country navigated through the aftermath of war, inflation rates began to creep up. There was heavy emphasis at the time on trade liberalization. The exchange rate system changed from fixed to floating, allowing capital to flow more freely, but this destabilized the currency when inflation continued to increase. The government's low tax and high spending policies, aimed at stimulating growth, also contributed in fueling the fire. By the early 1980s, inflation had escalated into hyperinflation. The bank crisis of 1983 saw Israel's four biggest banks collapse, plunging the financial markets into turmoil. The crisis peaked with the annual inflation rate hitting a staggering 400% in 1984. Hyperinflation eroded the purchasing power of Israeli households, making everyday goods and services increasingly unaffordable. It disrupted economic planning and threatened to unhinge the financial stability of the country. Prices of goods were skyrocketing at an alarming rate, creating a climate of uncertainty and economic distress. The Israeli government and the central bank recognized the dire need for a robust intervention to rein in the runaway inflation. If no measures were implemented, inflation was predicted to reach 1,000% by the end of 1985. So that year, they rolled out a comprehensive stabilization plan, a kind of economic emergency brake to halt the spiraling inflation. The plan encompassed a sharp reduction in government spending, a freeze on public sector wages, and a stringent monetary policy to curb the excessive flow of money in the economy. Additionally, a fixed exchange rate with the US dollar was established to help curb inflationary expectations and restore some semblance of confidence in the Israeli economy. The measures taken under the stabilization plan began to yield results, successfully taming hyperinflation and gradually restoring economic stability. Calmed inflation rates of around 20% marked a significant turning point, transitioning from a period of economic chaos to a phase of recovery and stable growth. However, it took another 2 decades to reduce inflation to zero. Coming out of the hyperinflation crisis, Israel continued its free market reforms, resulting in an incredible high-tech boom and subsequent rapid growth. By the late 80s, Israel's economy became largely liberalized. The stabilization plan heralded a shift from a more socialist-oriented economy to a model embracing neoliberal principles. This laid the groundwork for what would become a thriving high-tech sector. By 1985, high-tech accounted for 58% of Israel's industrial production, up from 37% in 1965. Israel gained a reputation for being a startup nation thanks to its entrepreneurial spirit and becoming a hub for micro and small businesses. Key to this high-tech boom was also the influx of highly skilled Jewish immigrants from the collapsing Soviet Union, which provided a 1 million worker boost to the sector's human capital. By 2000, the mostly Jewish population passed 6 million. Soviet immigrants comprised around a fifth of the population, helping to construct a young, unstoppable, and innovative workforce. The establishment of venture capital firms and the influx of foreign investment fueled the growth of tech startups, creating a vibrant, innovative ecosystem that continues to thrive to this day. The complete structure of Israel's output changed as a result. Agriculture and low-tech industry declined in importance, while this new high-tech industry achieved primary importance alongside services. The government also changed its role in public finance. Instead of interfering with industry, they focused on providing an extensive social welfare system to reduce inequality. A national healthcare system was established, and unemployment and child benefits forming a substantial part of the state budget. This helped develop the economy to one of the least unequal in the modern world, though this initiative was scaled back in the 2000s. The 2000s also brought changes to how Palestine was treated by Israel. The latter, now in complete territorial dominance, aimed to solve the conflict, but failed every time. The Oslo Accords signed in the 90s gave Palestine some limited self-governance over the West Bank and Gaza territories, but did not recognize them as a state. A following economic agreement created a customs union for trade, but Israel always remained in full control, as a landlocked state with a limited number of allies. Palestine has never had a bargaining chip and has always been fully economically dependent on Israel. Groups within Palestine have become increasingly unhappy with their lack of sovereignty. Arab uprisings called intifadas ratcheted up in the 1980s, but became more violent, especially especially in the 2000s, leading to severe restrictions between the two economies. Most Palestinians within Israel work in areas of low importance, such as agriculture and construction. Following violent outbreaks, Israel have been known to reduce the employment rights of Palestinians and have been accused of operating as an apartheid, continually oppressing the Palestinian people. Uprisings and the obligatory retaliations have only worsened with time. The cycle of violence followed by restrictions have become especially worse following the election of militant group Hamas as Gaza's government in 2006. Israeli restrictions severely set back the Palestinian economy in the early 2000s, erasing many of the economic gains achieved over multiple decades. For instance, the per capita GNP plummeted to $900 in 2004 from about $1,500 in 1999. The main economic implication of conflict for Israel is tweaks in the defense budget, which in the early 2000s constituted about 25% of GDP. But at this time, there was a more concerning event playing on the minds of Israeli finance ministers. Their high-tech boom had turned into a bubble, bursting in spectacular fashion. In the spring of 2000, the worldwide dot-com bubble burst, hitting Israeli industry hard. The situation worsened with the initiation of the Second Intifada in September of the same year, severely affecting the tourism industry and causing a significant drop in consumer demand. By 2001, the worldwide recession had set in, further weighing down on Israel's exports, contributing to Israel's worst recession since its establishment. Unemployment hit double digits, growth shrunk 4% in just one quarter in 2002, and investment into their key sectors tumbled. Many startups had been made bankrupt, damaging its status as a business hotspot. However, Israel orchestrated a remarkable recovery by diversifying its market outreach to rapidly growing economies in East Asia. The rebound of the Israeli tech sector played a pivotal role in this recovery, thanks to a rising global demand for computer software. Additionally, the 9/11 incident triggered an increase in demand for security and defense products, providing an avenue for Israel to export more of its technologies abroad. The 2000s also witnessed a substantial influx of foreign investment in Israel, drawing in companies that had previously avoided the Israeli market. In 2006, foreign investment totaled $13 billion, showcasing a renewed confidence in Israel's economic landscape. Despite the challenges, Israel's economy displayed a resilience epitomized by the Financial Times remark, "Bombs drop, yet Israel's economy grows." It transitioned to a net lender nation with a significant net external debt surplus of $60 billion in 2012, maintaining a current account surplus of about 3% of its GDP. This was pivotal during the global recession in 2008, from which they emerged relatively unscathed. They recorded positive GDP growth in 2009 and concluding the decade with an unemployment rate lower than many Western countries. This resilience was attributed to Israel's position as a net lender rather than a borrower, lowering the amount of risky financial practices compared to countries like the US. Israel's economy has mostly thrived since the 2008 financial crisis. They became a full OECD member in 2010, with the body praising Israel's proclivity for innovation. They showcased a fast recovery with an average growth rate of 4% throughout the 2010s. The only thing that temporarily halted growth was the COVID pandemic, and even then, the rebound was swift and resilient, even through European-wide challenges caused by Russia's invasion of Ukraine. In 2022, GDP soared past $500 billion. The economy is now recognized as a world-leading, highly developed free market system, with a sophisticated welfare state, modern infrastructure, and a high technology sector rivaling many Western countries, including regions like Silicon Valley. The financial service sector has another pivotal role, with over 100 active venture capital funds. Agriculture still has some, albeit little, contribution to output. Israel boasts many large corporations across all sectors, including banks, software, and pharma companies. The United States is their largest trading partner, accounting for 25% of all their exports, followed by China at 6%. Their main exports are electrical machinery, gems, metals, medical equipment, and plastics. In 2022, they exported $73 billion worth of goods, all from a wholly diverse range. They have truly transformed from almost nothing into a modern, diversified, and innovative economy. Despite all these strengths to Israel, recent events have proven that not all is well for the nation. Their tensions with Palestine have not stopped. Quite the opposite, in fact, they have escalated. They are now in a full war with Hamas, with a land invasion of Gaza expected soon. This has obviously already caused numerous problems within the region, but it has the potential to cause complete devastation to the development of all Israel and Palestine. When looking ahead, it is clear that one topic sticks out like a sore thumb. The future well-being of the entire region depends on the resolution of the current war. Israel has been condemned for continuing the bombings of Gaza at the cost of thousands of civilian lives. While they feel as if they have justification, particularly Hamas's recent incursion into their territory, Israel risks damaging its international reputation, putting at risk relationships with important trading partners and investors. A significant portion of Israel's economic growth and innovation is driven by foreign investment. Negative perceptions could reduce the influx of capital, or even result in company boycotts, stifling growth. If the US has any reason to believe the Israel may be committing war crimes, they could be forced into sanctioning them. Their flourishing tourism sector is no doubt taking a hit currently, with less and less people willing to step into an active war zone. War could also dissuade potential talent from moving to Israel, while encouraging existing high-skilled workers to seek opportunities elsewhere, creating a brain drain scenario which could hamper innovation and growth. Finally, economic performance is often tied to social cohesion. The conflict might exacerbate social divides within Israel, which could in turn impact the work environment, productivity, and by extension, economic performance. The main goal for Israel over the next few years is to resolve this situation in the least controversial way possible. Diplomacy should be the default, but I understand the difficulties of dealing with an organization whose main agenda is to eradicate your nation. The goals of stopping Hamas and ending the war peacefully seem like a major trade-off. It is a problem that does not seem to have a happy conclusion, but let's hope for the sake of innocent lives that the least destructive outcome is achieved. If this happens, Israel can focus on doing what it has done best for decades, developing an economy. Innovation still seems to be at the forefront. The recent strides in sectors like artificial intelligence, cybersecurity, and life sciences epitomize the potential for continued growth and global leadership. However, one looming challenge is the demographic shift with a growing aging population, which could strain public finances while reducing the talented workforce. Also, green technology should be at the top of their priorities for sustainable growth to be achieved. Anyways, upon reflection, it is quite remarkable that Israel has orchestrated a thorough transition from a nascent state with scarce resources to a rich, risk-taking economy, showcasing to the world the boundless possibilities that lie in the union of human ingenuity, tenacity, and a forward-thinking ethos. Thank you for watching.